Caroline's eyes fluttered open, but she could see nothing in the pitch-black room. She tried to move, but quickly realized that her hands and feet were bound tightly with rope. She struggled, but it was no use. She was trapped. Panic set in as she frantically tried to remember how she had ended up in this place. She couldn't recall anything beyond the fact that she had been walking home from work when someone had grabbed her from behind and everything went dark. Caroline's heart raced as she listened intently for any sounds that might give her a clue as to where she was. It was completely silent except for the sound of her own labored breathing. Time seemed to drag on endlessly until she finally heard footsteps approaching. Her heart raced as she watched the door slowly creak open, revealing a figure shrouded in darkness. "Good, you're awake," a deep voice said. Caroline's heart sank as she realized that she was being held captive by a deranged serial killer. She tried to scream, but a hand quickly covered her mouth. "SHH, SHH, there's no need to be scared," the killer said calmly. "I won't hurt you. Yet." The killer's voice sent shivers down Caroline's spine, and she knew she had to get out of there before it was too late. Days turned into weeks, and Caroline was no closer to escaping her captor. The killer seemed to take pleasure in tormenting her, taunting her with the fact that she would never leave alive. As Caroline's hopes of survival dwindled, she began to notice small details about the room that might help her escape. She discovered that the window was old and could be easily pried open. However, the killer had been clever and had installed an alarm system that would go off if anyone tried to escape through the window. Caroline knew that her only chance was to somehow disable the alarm system. She began to pick at the knots that bound her hands and feet, using whatever sharp objects she could find in the room. She was careful to do it quietly, not wanting to alert the killer to her plan. After days of working at the knots, Caroline finally managed to free her hands. She immediately set to work on disabling the alarm system, using her knowledge of electronics to her advantage. It was a risky move, but she had to try. As she worked, Caroline could feel the killer's eyes on her, watching her every move. She knew that if she was caught, she would be punished severely. But she also knew that she couldn't just sit there and wait for her inevitable demise. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Caroline managed to disable the alarm system. She knew she had to act fast before the killer realized what she had done. With her heart pounding in her chest, Caroline crawled towards the window and began to pry it open. It was a struggle, but she eventually managed to open it wide enough to climb through. As she was about to jump out, she heard a noise behind her. She turned to see the killer standing in the doorway, his eyes filled with rage. Caroline froze, unsure of what to do. She knew that she couldn't outrun him, but she also couldn't stay there and let him catch her. In a split-second decision, Caroline jumped out the window and landed on the ground below. Pain shot through her body as she hit the ground, but Caroline forced herself to get up and run. She didn't look back, knowing that the killer was close behind her. Caroline ran as fast as she could, her heart pounding in her chest. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she had to get as far away from the killer as possible. As she ran, she could hear the killer's footsteps getting closer and closer. She felt like she was running in slow motion, her legs heavy and sluggish. Just when she thought she couldn't run any further, Caroline saw a glimmer of light in the distance. She ran towards it, hoping that it was a sign of civilization. As she got closer, Caroline realized that it was a road. She stumbled onto the pavement, gasping for breath. She looked around frantically, hoping to see a car or a person that could help her. Just then, she saw headlights in the distance. Caroline waved her arms frantically, hoping that the driver would see her. The car screeched to a halt beside her, and Caroline was relieved to see that it was a police car. She stumbled towards the officer, tears streaming down her face. "It's okay. You're safe now," the officer said, putting a comforting hand on her shoulder. Caroline was whisked away to the hospital, where she was treated for her injuries and checked for any signs of long-term damage. She spent weeks recovering, both physically and emotionally, from the trauma of her captivity. The police launched a massive manhunt for the killer, using all the resources at their disposal. They combed the area around the cabin where Caroline had been held captive, searching for any clues that might lead them to the killer's identity. Despite their efforts, the killer remained elusive. He seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind. Caroline was grateful to be alive, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the killer was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next victim. She became hyper-vigilant, constantly looking over her shoulder and avoiding any situation that might put her in danger. Her once carefree demeanor had been replaced by a sense of unease and fear that she couldn't shake. Months passed, and Caroline slowly began to rebuild her life. She moved to a new city, changed her name, and tried to put the past behind her. But even though she tried to forget, the memories of her captivity lingered, haunting her every waking moment. She knew that she would never truly be free until the killer was caught and brought to justice.